I don't know about you all, but when I hear the word false prophet, it conjures up images of corrupt church leaders. So the stories that we hear on the news that maybe we've experienced in our lives, either from those that we know or from our own experiences. Those leaders take the church leader who is getting a very, very large salary, and it turns out ended up having an affair with someone that was not that person's spouse. Or those stories of the preacher or other people in the church who were embezzling the money. Basically, those people who were focused more on themselves and a little less on God. The thing is that the statement we hear from Jesus in our gospel is not just for those who are church leaders. The statement about false prophecy applies to everyone. Because as we know, as those who have been baptized, we are all leaders. We are all ministers in God's church. And that's a very sobering realization that all of us could at one point in time be a false prophet. But having that realization is important because it helps us to stop and think about what we're doing. It helps us to stop and think and realize, well, how do we do this? How do we keep from being false prophets? And the answer is what we see in our fruits. Are we producing good fruits, or are we producing bad? The answer is at the end of this gospel reading that we just heard. The answer for how not to be a false prophet is to ask ourselves whether we're following our will or are we striving to do God's will. There are times for all of us when we do need to stop and think about this. Are we following our will or are we following God's? If we're following God's will, well then that's easy. But if we're following our own will, we do need to stop and think and say, okay, how do I need to move back? And there's an answer to that too. The answer is that we stop and listen. We take a moment to breathe. When we're following our own will, we stop. When we start to listen to what God is saying to us. And in that way, we move back on that track. As long as we are listening to what it is that God is saying to us, then we don't have to worry, because then we'll be producing good fruits.